As we reflect on the life of the late Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu all over the world and in South Africa particularly, many have reflected on what the Arch stood for and his contribution to our democracy and at large. For some more reflections, we're joined by ANC struggle veteran Mavuso Msimang, again also the former Department of Home Affairs Director General. Mr. Msimang, thank you for joining us here on the SABC tonight to once again pay homage to the late Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I've just listened to this wonderful musical tribute. It was outstanding.
Mr. Msimang, let's start off there. I mean, we obviously saw the tribute and the memorial that was taking place at the Cape Town City Hall in honor of our late Archbishop. I mean, you were obviously privy to watching the unfoldings as we were waiting to chat to you. What did the mood and atmosphere encompass for you? Do you think it was a befitting tribute for the late Archbishop?
Absolutely. This is a person who would have danced to this music. You know how to do all of those things. He was an all-rounder, a very complete human being, at home in the religious atmosphere, in the religious base, which is really where he was, a base that unfurled his talents and allowed him to be an all-round person, fitting with all issues of importance to society. It was a very, very fitting tribute.
You speak of him being a well-rounded, all-rounded individual. And as we've listened to the reflections that have come through about his life and times, I mean, there were a few themes that stood out, including his role in the church, his perhaps the struggle for liberation in South Africa, and then also his role at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I wonder, as we hone in on just one of them tonight, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, perhaps with the benefit of hindsight, you know, many looking at the outcomes of the commission to date and its impact on South Africa at large. I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, was Archbishop Desmond Tutu the right person for the job at the right time to lead such a commission? I mean, a lot of criticisms came through about him at the time for being too religious and too spiritual. What are your thoughts looking back?
Well, I really don't quite understand the criticism. I cannot think of a better person who could have chaired that commission. I'm sure there are some. There are. But I don't know what anybody believes was deficient in the manner in which Desmond Tutu, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, handled the TRC. And by the way, this is a person who the fact that he expressed his humanity, I've heard people talking about him weeping and so on. I've seen a wonderful poem paying tribute to his weeping. He wept. People came to take pictures and broadcast this all over the world. That was the strength of this man, who would come from there and stand up to the issues, to the requirements. I do not believe that anybody would have probed this better than he did. The TRC was about finding out, getting confessions from people who had committed very serious crimes during the apartheid era against the people. They were invited to come, and when they did come, those who did, they were put through some really very serious grilling. I think he conducted himself in the manner that he did. He asked the questions that needed to be asked. He expressed human emotions, but that did not compromise a single principle about what needed to be done at the commission. I have heard this thing, but I think really it's almost a waste of time to debate such non-issues as to whether he was too religious to do anything. What did he not ask as a result of being religious? Tutu has always, Archbishop Tutu, always been very outspoken, very courageous, challenged the very, very the people who were behind apartheid, he spoke to them. Truth to power, as they say. I don't know what was feeble about the manner in which people say he handled the TRC. I don't even know how to debate this thing because it's a completely, nonsensical argument. So what was not asked that should have been asked? The fact that some people didn't come to the commission, TRC, is not his fault. The fact that when they didn't come, he and his fellow TRC commissioners made it very clear that they should, the state should then take over and follow up on the people who had not presented themselves, taking the opportunity to tell the truth and be completely freed without any fear of punishment. By the way, if the issue here is that it should have been a Nuremberg type of thing where you are grilled and you are punished because it's been, you've confessed or it's been proven that you did wrong things during the apartheid time, that model may have worked, but what the TRC model sought to do was to present an opportunity, not a handiwork of Desmond Tutu alone. It was to say, if you come and confess, this expresses his humanity and the humanity of other people, you should treat. If people didn't come to them to present themselves to do this, he can't be blamed for that. And indeed, the people who told the truth were granted the amnesty that was required. There's no problem with that. I don't see how else it could have been done.
Mr. Msimang, thank you for those sentiments. I wonder, as we also look at the nature of the TRC and perhaps how it was born out of the true spirit of public participation. Again, as you said, those coming forward to ask for amnesty, perhaps forgiveness as well, facilitate the journey towards healing as well for the nation at large. I mean, as these participations were unfolding, I mean, what do you distinctly remember about the former Archbishop during that time? And as the atrocities were rehashed, I wonder, how did everyone support each other during this transition?
The human being in him, the humanitarian in the man came out. He never really hid the fact that his approach was that of the intention here was to say, come out, tell us what happened. And people spoke and he empathized so much with the victims that, I mean, in one of the famous pictures that has been taken shortly after the TRC sitting began, we saw him weeping and so on. I think, to me, this was the betrayal of his strength. The important thing is to determine what needed to be done. I do think that the reparations could have been more, the TRC called for reparations.
Yeah.
If they were not given, it's not really a matter of a shortfall, a shortcoming on the part of the TRC. We saw the humanity of the man without sacrificing the principle of what needed to be done. We saw people who had come to confess. I mean, apartheid honchos who you would never have thought would humble themselves and say, yes, we did this. A lot of things were revealed, by the way. A lot of those revelations enabled people to find closure. People had died at the hands of the apartheid regime. The relatives did not know what happened. The TRC was able to draw out those things And for those who came forward, I think the treatment and the confessions were genuine. And so I think the fact that Desmond Tutu behaved in the manner that he did when he was confronted with pain, he showed his pain. That to me is the humanity of the man. I do not see a single issue of compromise in the manner in which he managed the interrogations.
Well, you speak about the openness and transparency that was needed for the TRC to occur. But I mean, we also understand that not everyone came to the party. You alluded to the issue of the reparations policy as well, that still continues to resurface somewhat. And I wonder, in your opinion, was the legacy of the commission compromised due to the slow implementation of the TRC's recommendations? Did that impact his legacy in any way with regards to the commission itself?
It shouldn't impact the legacy of Desmond Tutu. It compromised the work of the TRC. It was incomplete to the extent that many people who should have come forward because they have committed atrocities during the apartheid time did not do so. But the TRC made it quite clear that the road was open now for the government, for the authorities to move forward and deal with these people. They had spurned the opportunity to tell the truth and be forgiven. For that reason, another agency, another authority needed to take action and do what the TRC could not do. It couldn't have done it in the absence of the people who were supposed to come and confess to their wrongdoings. So yes, the TRC work has been, to a very large extent, compromised in the sense that just too many people who did not come forward remained outside, and they escaped. They defied justice, and so yes, this exercise that was supposed to reconcile people and build a common nation going forward was seriously, its work was jeopardized by the fact that people did not come forward and the authorities did not act to ensure that, with that option having been spent, another type of action needed to be taken to deal.
Well, Mr. Msimang, obviously there are a lot of challenges and perhaps more questions than answers in some instances regarding the TRC. But when we look at the lessons learned from Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, from the commissioners, from those who came forth and testified, perhaps even those who sought amnesty at large. I mean, what are some of the lessons we can take from them? And in the same breath, when we look at the issue of dehumanization at large, we're still fighting the triple threats of poverty, inequality, unemployment, their cliches and stereotypes, and just perhaps even plain ignorance that continue to permeate our society. How do we, as individuals and as a nation, start to rehumanize those who have been dehumanized as we navigate this next chapter, just the way the Arch did?
What the TRC wasn't able to accomplish has to be accomplished by others. There is no doubt about the fact that people were not interested in availing themselves of the opportunity that was given. We remain a very, very seriously divided society here. What you mentioned about inequality, poverty, and all of that is a matter of fact. I really cannot understand why this would be laid at the door of the TRC. Perhaps the terms of reference of TRC should have encouraged maybe more enforced reparations beyond individuals. If the sins of apartheid. Well, there was a new government, and you could not ask the previous government to atone for sin once it was over. But I think what some people have said correctly is that whether this was for the TRC to do, I'm not sure, but to make sure that the people who had benefited during the apartheid time for peace and reconciliation and this rainbow nation to happen, they should have been made to pay a penalty for what they give the people the opportunity to benefit. Where was the money going to come from, for instance, to alleviate poverty and so on? People have felt that the people who were already at the top of the time were given the opportunity to get away with it. They became even richer and so on. My question is, that is a fact, and that is why the situation in which we are in South Africa persists. I'm not quite sure that the TRC had the authority to deal with that.
Yeah, there's obviously so much more to unpack. Also wanted to get into the issue of the Defence Force, the MK veterans, perhaps who've been left out of, South Africa's progress. Perhaps how they're also dealing with many issues that they continue to face. But we're going to leave the conversation there, Mr. Msimang. I want to thank you once again for joining us. Again, ANC veteran, Mr. Mavuso Msimang, again reflecting on the life of the late Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu.